There are places in this world where time doesn't pass. It waits. It waits for the right moment, the right victim. In 2015, I brought my pregnant wife to the quiet village of my ancestors, hoping to escape the chaos of city life. But I didn't know we were stepping into a graveyard of forgotten sins. This is the story of how 1 week in a beautiful village destroyed everything I loved. After 5 long years of failed treatments, heartbreak, and late-night prayers, Rajushri and I finally received the miracle we had been hoping for. She was pregnant. But the doctor warned us her condition was fragile. She needed peace. She needed clean air and complete rest. We considered the usual spots, Shimla, Nainital, maybe even Kerala. But surprisingly, it was my father who suggested something different. Rani Jayan, he said quietly, eyes distant. Go to the village. It's peaceful there. I had never seen it myself. Our family left Rani Jayan almost 80 years ago. But something about the way he said it, like he was passing on a burden rather than a suggestion. Rajushri, ever the optimist, loved the idea. Imagine, she smiled, us waking up to birdsong and fresh air, not honking traffic. We packed our bags. But some doors should never be reopened. The further we drove from the city, the more the world around us began to change. Highways gave way to narrow roads. Towering apartments faded into sprawling green fields. Rajushri leaned out the window, hair flying, eyes lit with joy. I tried to match her excitement, but a strange anxiety was growing inside me. We arrived just past midnight. The moon was full, casting a pale blue glow over the quiet landscape. Rani Jayan was still, too still.
No dogs barking, no crickets chirping.
Just wind rustling through mango trees like whispered warnings. The house stood just as my father had described it. 2 stories, ancient, and slouched slightly to one side like it had been trying to fall for decades. Inside, the house greeted us with silence. Dust covered every surface. Spiderwebs adorned the corners like cursed lace. Yet Rajushri's face lit up. "It's perfect," she whispered, running her fingers across an old wooden swing in the veranda. I tried to smile back, but I felt like something was watching us. My father seemed dazed. He walked in slowly, as if retracing footsteps he had been avoiding his whole life. Then, just as suddenly as we entered, he collapsed. One moment he was there, and the next, sprawled unconscious on the sofa, his face pale, lips dry. There was no hospital in the village, only a dispensary closed after dark. I loaded my father into our car and drove to the nearest city hospital, nearly 2 hours away through unlit roads and overgrown tracks. Rajushri begged to come, but she was in no shape to travel. "I'll be fine," she insisted. "Just bring him back safe." I looked back at her one last time, standing alone in the doorway of that ancient house. I should have turned around right then. At the hospital, the diagnosis was simple. A sudden BP crash due to dehydration and exhaustion. He'd recover. I called Rajushri to let her know once, twice, 20 times. Nothing. No ringing. Just silence. That night, in the corner of a cold waiting room, I stared at my phone screen like it held the secrets of the universe. Something was wrong. I could feel it. By the time I returned to the village with my father, it was already late afternoon. The house loomed in the same place, but something about it felt off, like the angles had shifted, like the walls were leaning in just a little more. Inside, I found Rajushri in the bedroom, but not in bed. She was standing in the corner, her back to me, her fingernails dragging slowly and methodically across the wall, scratching, digging. The wallpaper was torn, her hands were bleeding, and she didn't respond when I called her name. When I finally reached her, she turned around slowly and smiled as if nothing had happened. "Where's Papa? Is he okay?" Her voice was calm, almost cheerful. She didn't even acknowledge the blood on her hands. I led her to the bed and tried to ask what happened, but she just laughed softly and said she must have sleepwalked. I wanted to believe that. I called our doctor in Delhi. He blamed it on stress and hormonal changes. "It's not uncommon," he said. "Just keep her calm, lots of rest, gentle environment." But this wasn't stress. This wasn't hormonal. Something had entered our home. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard whispers. Faint, wet-sounding words spoken in a dialect I didn't understand. Not Hindi, not Bhojpuri, something older. At around 2:45 a.m., I jolted awake to find Rajashri missing. Again, I searched every room empty. I checked the bathroom, the veranda, even the old storage shed. Nothing. Finally, I climbed the stairs to the roof, and there she was. Rajashri was walking backward, slowly, deliberately, toward the edge of the roof. She kept mumbling something as she walked. Woe a rahi hai. Woe a rahi hai. She's coming. She's coming. I called her name. No response. I rushed forward, caught her just as her heels slipped off the edge. She collapsed into my arms, unconscious, sweating, burning hot to the touch. When she woke up, she was trembling. She was here, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. She wants our baby. That was the moment I stopped pretending this was anything medical. Something was in my wife. The next morning, I took a walk through the village. Not a soul in sight. Doors shut, curtains drawn. Only one person agreed to talk to me. An old man named Hari Babu who lived near the abandoned temple. You shouldn't have brought a pregnant woman here, he said, refusing to meet my eyes. He told me a story, one buried by time and shame, about a girl from a lower caste who was killed 50 years ago while pregnant. Her lover's family disapproved of the union and murdered her in cold blood. Her spirit never left. She doesn't want any mother to feel joy, he said. She takes their babies, sometimes their lives. I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked him what to do. Find Pandit Raghavan, he said, before it's too late. That night, Rajashri's temperature soared. Her body shook violently. She started muttering in that same strange dialect, her voice deeper, raspier. I tried everything, cold compress, paracetamol, prayer. Then she stopped breathing. For 2 seconds, 3, I panicked, grabbing her shoulders to shake her awake. And then she opened her eyes. But they weren't her eyes anymore. They were pitch black. Rajashri's black eyes didn't blink. She sat straight up in bed, her face expressionless but somehow full of malice. Her breathing was slow, too slow. It was like she was mimicking the act of being human but doing it wrong. Woe a chuki hai, she whispered. She has arrived. I stumbled backward, almost knocking over the lantern. Her head slowly turned toward me, the way prey senses a predator nearby. But now she was the predator. Before I could react, she let out a scream so guttural, so unnatural. It was as though something ancient was being unearthed inside her. I ran out of the room and called the village pundit immediately. He said only one thing before hanging up: don't let her be alone. But by the time I got back into the room, she was gone. No signs of struggle, no creaking door, just gone. I searched the entire house, then the courtyard, then the narrow alley behind the house. Nothing. I was starting to believe I was losing my mind, until I looked up. Rajashri was sitting on top of the cupboard, her knees hugged to her chest, her head buried, her hair falling in tangles. Pandit Raghavan arrived just before midnight, holding a brass trident and a satchel filled with incense, vermilion, and dried herbs. The second he stepped inside, the air changed, colder, denser, like the walls had closed in. We approached the bedroom together. Rajashri was still on top of the cupboard, but now she was laughing. A sharp, guttural laugh that made my bones ache.
Bahut dekha de Pandit ji, uski zans rukne wali hai.
You're too late, Pandit. Her breath is already fading. Pandit Raghavan began the ritual. He chanted Sanskrit mantras, sprinkling holy water across the room. As he circled the bed, the walls began to shake. Literally shake. The cupboard cracked, and Rajashri's body jerked forward. She fell to the floor with an inhuman thud, but didn't cry out. She rose to her feet like a puppet, her limbs jerking. Then she charged at the pundit with a speed I didn't know was humanly possible. He struck the floor with his trident, shouting, Agne Svaha, Kodo is sharer ko. Smoke burst from the center of the room. Rajashri screamed again, this time with the voice of two people. After the ritual, Rajashri fainted. Her breathing steadied. Her eyes returned to normal, brown, human, terrified. Pandit Raghavan turned to me, drenched in sweat. He told me the full story. 50 years ago, a low-caste girl fell in love with the son of a zamindar. When she became pregnant, his family was furious. In a drunken rage, they dragged her into the forest and slit her throat, burying her in a well behind the village temple. But she didn't die alone. The baby inside her died too, and her soul, filled with rage, never left. Since then, every pregnant woman who entered the village alone had either miscarried or died. No one talked about it. The elders kept it secret. She believes no woman should become a mother if she couldn't, he said. She will keep coming back until her soul is released. Pandit Raghavan gave me two options. Leave the village before sunrise, never return. Perform a moksha ritual at the well, and risk our lives again. I didn't hesitate. We leave now. I carried Rajashri in my arms as we left the house. The wind howled through the trees like a warning. The shadows seemed to slither behind us. But we didn't stop. We didn't look back. We drove through the night until we reached the city. And I swear, only when the sun came up did I feel the weight lift off my chest. The story of Rajashri and the cursed village might seem like a cinematic horror tale, but cases like this are more common than most people realize. India's vast rural landscape is dotted with villages carrying generations of folklore, some of which hide deep, unresolved trauma. Let's look at 3 real-life incidents eerily similar to what happened in our story. These aren't rumors. They're documented cases, some with video evidence, others buried in old newspaper archives and whispered village stories. In the tribal hills of Dungarpur, a 7-month pregnant woman named Kanta was reportedly found crawling on all fours outside her home, speaking in a voice that wasn't hers. In a dialect no one in the area had heard before. Neighbors claimed her eyes were jet black and her hands had scratch marks that couldn't be self-inflicted. The woman later confessed, during a lucid state, that someone else was inside her. Someone who died in childbirth decades ago in the same village. Local exorcists claimed the area was cursed due to a ritual that was left incomplete during the colonial era. A young couple from Delhi, vacationing in Reva's rural outskirts, stayed in an old Haveli recommended by a travel blog. The woman, for months pregnant, went missing one night. Her husband found her at dawn, barefoot, standing silently in a pond, her nightgown soaked and eyes fixated on a banyan tree. She later claimed someone told her to come to the water, and that if she had gone deeper, she would have found her. She miscarried a week later. What's chilling? Locals warned them not to stay in that Haveli, because a pregnant woman was murdered there in the 1940s and buried beneath the pond. In Nadia district, West Bengal, a woman began having dreams of an old shrine she had never seen. In every dream, she was pregnant, running barefoot toward a decaying temple surrounded by banyan trees, whispering voices calling her name. One day, she actually found the shrine, just like in her dreams. It was real. Locals said it was abandoned after a midwife and her unborn child were burned alive during a witch hunt over 150 years ago. That same night, the woman fell violently ill. She had never had complications before, but she lost her baby within 48 hours. Doctors were baffled. She was healthy just days earlier. As terrifying as these stories are, they raise deeper questions. Can trauma linger in places like a psychic scar? Do unresolved deaths or injustices leave behind energy that attaches to the living? And why do so many of these stories involve women, especially pregnant ones? Psychologists suggest that our brains, when exposed to isolation, fear, and cultural symbolism, can manifest intense reactions. In a village setting, with minimal access to healthcare or mental health support, possession can be both an explanation and a cry for help. Yet, when multiple people witness the same thing with consistency across decades, you have to wonder if something more is at play. We aren't here just to get scared. These stories matter because they show the intersection of folklore, psychological trauma, historical injustice, and collective belief. They remind us that every haunting is tied to a deeper truth, often rooted in suffering, silence, and suppression. In a country with as much cultural memory as India, it's not surprising that some places remember too much. After the horrifying night when Rajashri attacked herself with the knife, everything changed. She survived barely. The doctor said she had lost a lot of blood, but by some miracle, no vital organs were hit. But it wasn't the physical wounds that haunted us. It was what came after. The laughter, the shadows, the feeling that something was still with us. After the horrifying night when Rajashri attacked herself with the knife, everything changed. She survived barely. The doctor said she had lost a lot of blood, but by some miracle, no vital organs were hit. But it wasn't the physical wounds that haunted us. It was what came after. The laughter, the shadows, the feeling that something was still with us. Once we returned to Delhi, things didn't magically go back to normal. Rajashri couldn't sleep through the night. She would wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, saying she could still hear her nails scraping the wall. Even worse, she'd talk to things that weren't there, whisper to shadows, laugh at nothing. We tried therapy, medication, even a pastor and a tantric just in case. But her condition kept declining. And then 5 months later, she lost the baby. No complications, no medical reason. One morning, she just woke up and said, she took her. We were shattered. After the miscarriage, something inside Rajashri faded. She stopped talking, stopped eating. She would sit in silence, staring at the walls, sometimes humming a lullaby she never used to know. I remember once waking up in the middle of the night and finding her in the kitchen, whispering to an empty corner, "It's okay. I forgive you." She never told me who she was forgiving. That was the last night we spent in that house. I moved her into her parents' home. I stayed away thinking space might help, but it didn't. She slipped further away. Her mother said Rajashri would often cry into her hands and mutter. She never wanted to hurt us. She just didn't want to be forgotten. 6 months later, Rajashri was admitted to a private care facility, diagnosed with dissociative psychosis. They said it might have been triggered by trauma, sleep deprivation, or something she'd never shared. I visited every week for a year. Then one day, she didn't recognize me anymore. So why am I telling you all this? Because I know there are places in this world that remember things, dark things that humans have long tried to forget. And sometimes, when you step into those places unaware, you don't walk out the same. This story isn't just a ghost tale. It's a warning. Tradition, folklore, curses, call them what you want. But they're not just stories. They're memories. And memories can be deadly. I've spent years trying to rationalize what happened to Rajashri and to me in that village. Was it truly a haunting? Or was it collective psychological breakdown? A perfect storm of trauma, isolation, and superstition? Science would tell you that fear is a chemical reaction, that the mind, when pushed to its limits, can create illusions, that shared trauma can mimic paranormal experiences. But here's the thing. No psychologist, no therapist, no doctor could ever explain why Rajashri knew things she couldn't have, like the name of the woman who died in the village decades ago, or the lullaby no one had sung in generations. Looking back, I can't help but reflect on what the old priest told me that night, that some places carry the weight of past sins. For years, the villagers had lived with this burden quietly. They followed rituals not out of belief, but fear. They never left a pregnant woman alone because they'd learned the hard way not to. We walked in assuming we were above it, outsiders from the city who didn't believe in ghost stories. But folklore, in many ways, is a warning system, a protection mechanism passed through generations. We were arrogant, and we paid the price. There's a guilt I carry every day, for bringing Rajashri to that place, for ignoring the signs, for trying to rationalize what was clearly irrational, when what she needed was faith, not logic. People often ask me if I ever went back to that village. The answer is, I did, once. A year after Rajashri was hospitalized, I returned alone. The house was sealed, windows covered in dust. But I didn't go inside. I stood at the gate and placed a single marigold garland on the ground, a gesture of apology, or perhaps acknowledgement. Then I left and never looked back. You might think stories like this are rare, but they're not. In 2013, in a remote village in Rajasthan, a pregnant woman began acting strangely after moving into her ancestral home. Villagers reported hearing lullabies at night when no one was singing them. She too lost her baby under mysterious circumstances. Another case in Assam saw a family flee their new home after the pregnant daughter-in-law began sketching images of an unknown woman, later identified from a 30-year-old village murder case. These are not isolated. They're echoes, residue, and they raise an important question. What if places remember pain, even if people forget? So, here's what I've learned, what I want you to remember long after this video ends. Fear is not weakness, it's instinct. It's evolution's oldest survival tool. And stories? They're not just tales for scaring children. They are warnings from the past, carved into time by those who didn't survive their lessons. Next time someone tells you about a haunted place, don't laugh. Listen, because whether it's a spirit, a curse, or just collective memory, something happened there. And sometimes that something is still waiting. Before we close, I want to dedicate this story to Rajashri, the bravest person I ever knew. To those suffering in silence from trauma, grief, or guilt, you're not alone. Sometimes the scariest demons aren't supernatural, but the ones we carry within. But that doesn't mean you stop telling the story, because even the dead deserve to be remembered, especially them. If you enjoyed tonight's chilling tale, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps summon more spooky stories for you. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a night at the edge of fear. And tell me in the comments. Until next time, sleep tight, if you can.